There's someone I still think about sometimes. He moved through life quickly, always occupied, always stimulated, always trying to stay one step ahead of something he didn't fully understand. Not because he was driven, because slowing down for too long meant feeling things. He didn't want to feel restlessness, disappointment, the strange grief of watching yourself drift further and further away from the person you thought you might become. So he stayed moving. Phone, music, conversations, plans, scrolling, noise. Not because any of it truly satisfied him, but because it kept him just far enough away from himself. And if you watch closely, I think a lot of human behavior starts looking like this. Not direct living, regulation, tiny exits from uncomfortable states. You open your phone, not because you care what's there, but because something inside you doesn't want to stay still long enough to hear what's underneath the silence. You prepare endlessly, not because preparation is the goal, but because beginning would expose something. You think instead of move, research instead of commit, optimize instead of enter your life directly. And the strange part is, most of this doesn't even feel dramatic while it's happening. It just slowly becomes normal. That's what makes these patterns dangerous. They don't arrive like collapse. They arrive like habit, quietly, until eventually, the way you protect yourself starts becoming the way you live. I think a lot of people are trapped there right now, not fully living, not fully choosing, just hovering near things that matter to them. Thinking about starting, preparing to begin, trying to feel ready. And if you've ever sat in front of something important, a blank page, a conversation, a business idea, a creative project, a life change you know you need to make, then you probably know the feeling. You sit down, open the file, look at the thing, and suddenly your mind starts drifting sideways. You adjust something small, check something irrelevant, open your phone for a second, tell yourself you'll start properly in a minute. And what's strange is, part of you genuinely wants to do it, but another part quietly resists entering. Most people call this procrastination, but I don't think that's really what's happening, because a lot of the time, the task itself isn't the real problem. It's what the task would mean if you actually began, because at some point, the work stops feeling like work and starts feeling like evidence that you might actually change, evidence that this could become real, evidence that you could fail or succeed or lose the identity you've been hiding inside for years. Human beings don't just protect themselves from pain, they protect themselves from transformation. Your mind is constantly trying to maintain a familiar version of you, a stable psychological territory, someone who behaves in certain ways, avoids certain risks, stays inside familiar emotional patterns, and when an action threatens that identity, friction appears. Not because the action is impossible, because it destabilizes the current self. Once you start seeing this, a lot of behavior begins looking different. The endless scrolling, the overthinking, the preparation loops, the constant need to feel ready first. A lot of it isn't pleasure, it's protection. Protection from uncertainty, from exposure, from confronting the distance between the person you imagine being and the person your actions currently support. And over time, this creates a strange kind of split. Part of you can still see the life you want, and another part stays organized around avoiding the discomfort required to enter it. That split is exhausting, because eventually, you start living in almost beginning, almost changing, almost becoming someone else. And almost is seductive, because almost lets you keep possibility alive without forcing reality to test it. As long as you don't fully begin, you never fully confront the outcome. So the fantasy survives. But there's a cost to that. You can spend years protecting potential while quietly losing contact with your actual life. There was a period of my life where I started realizing I wasn't really living anymore. I was managing myself, regulating myself, distracting myself just enough to avoid fully confronting the fact that I had become disconnected from movement, disconnected from belief, and after a while, something quietly split. Part of me stayed inside the same loops, and another part started pulling away from the life I was living. Not physically at first, psychologically. One part kept trying to maintain the familiar life, and another part started looking at everything from a distance, wondering how much longer I could keep living like that. That's a hard feeling to explain, because from the outside, nothing necessarily looks catastrophic. You still function, still talk to people, still make plans, still think about change. But underneath it, something starts going numb. You stop trusting yourself. You stop believing your own intentions. You begin quietly adapting to a version of yourself you never actually meant to become, until eventually that version starts feeling normal, expected, like maybe this is just who you are now. And I think that's one of the most painful feelings a person can experience. Not dramatic pain, something quieter. The feeling that your life is slowly drifting away from you while you remain psychologically trapped. Inside patterns you can already see. That was the point where something in me realized, if one part of me stayed there, another part had to leave. And I did. Not with certainty, not with confidence, honestly, not even with much belief, just a quiet instinct that if I stayed psychologically organized around escape, my life would disappear into it. And I still think people misunderstand this completely. The behaviors protecting you can also imprison you. Sometimes what feels like safety is actually stagnation with softer lighting. And to be clear, this isn't about becoming obsessed with constant forward motion. Not every pause is avoidance. Not every period of stillness is dysfunction. Sometimes people genuinely need rest, integration, space to recover, but deep down, most people can feel the difference between stillness and slow self-abandonment. And maybe that's why movement matters so much, because I think people misunderstand clarity too. Most people wait for clarity before they move. They think, once I finally believe in myself, once I finally feel certain, once I finally become the right version of me, then I'll begin. But I don't think that's how it works. I think movement comes first, and clarity follows afterwards. You do something small, something real, and suddenly your nervous system has evidence, not fantasy, not potential, evidence. You take the walk, write the paragraph, make the call, upload the video, speak honestly once, and something shifts slightly, not because the action was huge, because your system finally has proof that movement is still possible. Because belief is rarely built through thinking alone. Belief is built when reality starts responding to action. And slowly, the identity begins updating. I had to learn that slowly, because for a long time, I kept trying to think myself into a different life, instead of moving myself into one. But eventually, another truth started becoming unavoidable. You don't build clarity in your head. You build it by moving your hands. And once you see that clearly, the hesitation starts looking different. Not like proof that you're broken, more like a threshold between the familiar self and the part of you that only appears through movement. And thresholds are crossed